News time, 5:45. Now extended traffic on the 5s with Chuck Brooks.
Well, so much for this quiet morning we'd hoped for this morning.
On the morning commute in Los Angeles,
you have a tough drive all ready to start you off with.
It can be difficult to imagine the sun ever setting.
And a backup now starting at about Warner Avenue if you're coming up.
On the internal combustion engine. But Chris Payne will tell you appetite is growing for electric cars.
We're in the tipping point now.
He's best known as director of a biting documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car?
I wasn't really a car guy ever, but I was really into cool technology.
Back in the 90s, he drove a General Motors EV1, the first mass-market electric car. It held the promise of an oil-free future. But GM concluded it was losing money on the EV1 and destroyed them all. Chris Payne was incensed.
I don't imagine there's very many EV1s left that haven't been crushed out. It's pretty sad.
Payne blamed car manufacturers, oil companies, and the California government for killing the electric car.
I drove that car for about 5 years. In the process, I became kind of committed to why this technology is good and is going to roll forward in the future. This is the garage where we keep the electric cars. The roof here is full of solar panels.
A decade later, he's clearly a convert.
The energy comes into this circuit board, and then we send it to the different chargers.
So you're powering off the sun?
Yeah, everything is powered right off the sun here.
He now owns 3 types of electric cars.
All 3 of these cars don't require a charger. You can just do it off the wall.
All subject of his sequel, Revenge of the Electric Car. That film chronicled GM back in the game with its gas-electric Volt, Nissan with its all-electric Leaf, and Silicon Valley billionaire Elon Musk unveiling the luxurious electric Tesla.
Really what matters is, are we making a difference in the world? Until we see every car on the road being electric, we will not stop. This is really just the beginning of the beginning.
Jump forward 7 or 8 years, the cars are coming back. People are like, whoa, the Model S won the car of the year. Wealthy people are saying, I'm going to choose that car instead of this car. You're in the middle of a big change, fundamental change that's happening.
In Canada, on the BC coast, some say change is coming fast.
0 to 100 kilometers in just a smidge over 4 seconds.
Vincent Argiro, who made his fortune designing health software, owned the first Tesla in British Columbia.
Charging port is here.
He traded in his Ferrari to buy it with his wife Maggie's blessing.
The idea of having a guilt-free sports car that was high performance but had 0 emissions, that was very exciting to us. The car has about as much storage space in the front of the car as most cars have in the back.
Wow.
Without a giant internal combustion engine, there's lots of room.
That's the kind of engine I could fix, maybe.
Naturally, when Tesla released its Model S, they got one.
Oh, you pushed the button. Okay, all right. Yeah. Nice. Okay. How much did it cost?
This car, as it's configured, is about $100,000.
Begging the question.
Is this just a rich person's plaything? What would you say to that?
We felt like because we have been blessed with wealth, that we were in a position to buy this car, that it was our social responsibility to do so, to move the technology forward, to put our faith and our trust and our money where our mouth is. If you really want to get rid of petroleum products, then find a way to buy one of these cars and stop talking about it.
In fact, Tesla owners can't stop talking about them.
The thing took off like a rocket.
It was so awesome.
You can go as fast as you want. You can go as far as you want.
And buy into a dream.
Turning Tesla into stock market darling with lofty promises to put gas stations out of business. Even car reviewers are raving.
This car performs better than anything we've ever tested before. Let me repeat that. Not just the best electric car, but the best car.
I'm really surprised to be hearing myself say this because I'm a gasoline engine guy, but you spend a little time with a powerful electric motor car and it's pretty convincing.
Impressive, yet not enough to convince this car reviewer.
You can take a gas car anywhere and find fuel. If it breaks, you can find somebody who can fix it. Having an electric car is sort of like being the first gasoline car driver back in 1907. You know, it's an adventure when you go on the road. You have to plan and you call ahead and make sure that thing's still there and carry some extra, you know, sleeping bag and some food because you may be on the roadside overnight if you're not watching.
It pains John Odell to say that. He reviews green cars for a living, like this one, an electric Fiat sold only in California. He himself owns 2 electric cars, but
they've got to break through, in marketing terms, it's called the valley of death. You have a new technology that you're marketing. It's always gobbled up enthusiastically by the early adapters who, you know, have an eye on that. And then you have this great valley of death that you have to get through to go from the early adapter to the early majority, where sort of mom and pop starts buying.
And moms and pops who only own 1 car still have range anxiety. Tesla may offer an impressive 370 kilometers on 1 charge, but the more affordable Nissan Leaf, only 120 kilometers. The fear of running out of juice is real, because charge stations are still few and far between. Plus, at a park and plug like this, it takes 4 hours to fully charge.
So you don't buy the claim that gas stations are going to be a thing of the past and we're going to see plug-ins on every corner?
No, I don't. I think the gasoline engine is going to be here in large numbers 25, 30, 40 years from now, unless, you know, we simply run out of gas for either geopolitical or economic reasons.
Chris Payne likes to say fear of change disappears once someone test drives an electric car.
Once people do it, they become like holy warriors.
But he knows North American buyers aren't stampeding to electric car showrooms. Fewer than 3,000 EVs and plug-ins were sold in Canada last year, less than 0.2% of auto sales. In the U.S., about 50,000 electric and plug-in hybrids were sold last year, a mere 0.6% of auto sales. Why? Oil still rules. Just 5 minutes from Payne's home, the largest urban oil field in the U.S., newly invigorated thanks to fracking.
I wanted to bring you up here because it really does suck. They're sucking up fossil fuels from the center of Los Angeles when we have all the power we need coming down from the sun on millions of roofs that could be powering all the electric cars here. Whether it's tar sands or going back to these old oil fields and fracking from them in the middle of a very populated area, it's old-time thinking, and it's not thinking what we can be doing.
What were you driving before? I was driving Prius. A Prius? Yes. And you like this one better? It's for green. It's good for the earth, right? And you don't smell gas.
Enter Paul Scott, the top salesman of Nissan Leafs in California.
I love talking to my customers and Leaf drivers in general because they all understand it the way I understand it.
He's a lifelong environmental activist who fought long for electric cars, then signed up to sell Leafs for Nissan.
You could be retired right now. Why the heck are you selling cars?
You know, it's important because transitioning from internal combustion to electric solves a lot of the world's worst problems. We fight wars over oil. We've never fought war over electricity, and we never will. You can make electricity from the sunlight falling on your house, from the wind blowing through the mountain passes, and you can run your home and your car on that renewable energy. That eliminates all the pollution from extracting, shipping, refining, distributing, and burning of oil.
Going back and forth, no problem. I don't even have a quick charge at home.
Yeah.
I just plug it into the wall, and it works. But Dad's in the hospital, I need to make a detour. Now I'm in trouble.
Well, that's why we have the fast charger.
Yeah, no, this is great.
For every consumer concern, Scott has an answer.
What am I going to have to do when I have to replace the battery? 8 or 10 years from now, I'm going to have to put $12,000, $8,000 into a new
It's
battery.
probably more like $5,000 or $6,000. And you've just driven the car for 8 or 10 years and haven't spent a dime for gas.
A lot of them are just looking at the bottom line, Paul, right? They're sitting down, they're punching their calculators, and they're saying, you know, I don't know if I can make the car payments right now on a $34,000 car.
It's really a matter of understanding math and looking at the long term rather than just today. What is it going to cost me today? Because, you know, these people who buy these cars or lease these cars, they stop going to gas stations.
But he admits it's a long, slow sell without government intervention a la Norway. Norway has more electric vehicle owners per capita than any country in the world. Sales jumped after the government declared EVs exempt from taxes, parking fees, and tolls, and installed thousands of free public charging stations. But different story in the U.S. The Obama administration did ask a panel of thinkers to fast forward 35 years to try to figure out how to cut gas emissions from cars by 80% by 2050.
So you start with all your new technologies.
John Odell was part of that panel and wasn't convinced electric is the only answer.
Short of, insert miracle here, we're going to have a mix of highly efficient gasoline cars, highly efficient conventional hybrid, gas electric hybrids, plug-in hybrids, some electrics, and some fuel cell hydrogen vehicles. So some battery electric.
No one technology is going to win.
No, by 2050, no one technology. We just don't see it. Our committee did not see it happening.
Tesla will have you believe this is the miracle.
The Tesla Supercharger. We expect to cover the entire United States and the lower part of Canada.
The Supercharger Highway, where Vincent and Maggie Argiro charge up in no time flat.
We need to be here for maybe a half an hour just to leave a little cushion to get home.
And it's free.
It is free.
Enough time to make new friends, perhaps discuss that $35,000 model Tesla promises for 2017. Then,
off we go.
Have a safe drive. Don't go too fast.
We won't.
Even though we can.
we will. Yeah, we'll keep the horse and reins.
Bye.
As for Chris Payne, he's on to a new documentary about the rise of bicycle culture.
I still think there's tremendous forces trying to shut down electric cars. And the good news is that there's a lot of forces trying to make them happen.
Will the electric car ever cross its valley of death? It won't happen overnight. Not without convincing consumers it's time to switch. Duncan McHugh, CBC News, Los Angeles.
If you were to go invent a carbon capture machine, you couldn't invent a better machine than a tree in terms of mitigation of climate change.
David Cleaves is climate change advisor for the U.S. Forestry Service. He says trees provide at least part of the solution to climate change.
First of all, trees capture carbon from the atmosphere, capture carbon dioxide, convert it to carbon in the tree, and store it there for hundreds of years. And even if a tree is turned into a wood product, that carbon remains stored there for many, many years, many decades, even hundreds of years more.
Cleaves admits his bias toward trees, but he's not alone. 5 years ago, the United Nations initiated a program at the Climate Change Conference for reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, now called REDD+. One of the solutions being discussed is a pay-for-performance mechanism. The Forestry Service's Shira Yaffe explains.
Where countries will be paid for their efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from their forest lands. And that's in the process of being negotiated, and that's really focused on developing countries.
South America and Africa have had the highest rate of deforestation, losing more than 7 million hectares of forest annually between 2000 and 2010. Such deforestation, says John Watkin of Conservation International, has ramifications well beyond its borders.
The Congo Basin is responsible for the rainfall that results in Lake Victoria receiving 70% of its water directly from rain onto it. Lake Victoria is the most thunderous area in the world. It's one of the sources of the Nile. Now, if the deforestation is extrapolated for the Congo Basin throughout DRC and the other countries, we will see a reduction in rainfall onto Lake Victoria, which will result in a reduction in rainfall onto the lake and the flow of the Nile out. That's going to have significant ramifications for all the countries north up towards the Mediterranean.
According to Conservation International, almost 60% of the world's forests are in developing countries. But 13 million hectares of forest are cleared each year for agriculture, ranching, logging, and mining. Efforts like Africa's Green Belt movement have helped improve deforestation rates with an emphasis on tree planting and sustainable farming. Other programs like the U.S. Forestry Service seek to put a value on trees. Matthew Edwardson is the Africa Program Coordinator with the U.S. Forestry Service.
In Central Africa, for example, we're working very closely in Gabon with the Gabonese government to basically help them inventory their national forest and really understand what they have. And that is the fundamental behind allowing for those countries to enter into these carbon market schemes which are being developed, because you have to know what you have before you can actually go forward and sell it.
Edwardson says the U.S. Forestry Service is working hard to adapt its forest management to a changing climate domestically as well as abroad.
And that's what we're, also trying to help individuals understand in Africa is, given, the increase in temperature in certain areas of, the Albertine Rift area of, Rwanda, Uganda, etc. What's going to happen to agricultural production systems? Will maize grow at a certain, level? And if it will not grow there, where are people going to move? And how do you adapt the management of a protected area to understand those likely movements of people? So helping policy and decision makers better understand that.
So while deforestation affects climate change, a warmer climate, or a colder climate for that matter, affects the forest.
We know that the forests themselves, the ones that are here, are evolving and moving basically northward and up the slopes because the warmer temperatures and everything goes along with it are chasing them. Our fires have gone up to about double the rate. The insect and disease problems because of the drought-induced stress and the susceptibility to insect and disease damage has gone up by an order of 3 just in the last 15 years. So we have many more acres that have been disturbed that need to be rapidly regenerated.
Because of replanting efforts, the net loss of trees has slowed. Asia has actually increased its forest cover by more than 2 million hectares annually for the past 10 years. Nigeria has one of the worst deforestation rates in the world, but the UN Food and Agriculture Organization says it is Brazil that loses the most forest land each year, more than 2.5 million hectares annually. Rebecca Ward, VOA News.
From the Encyclopedia of Life, this is One Species at a Time. I'm Ari Daniel. You're listening to the sound of Apis mellifera, honeybees.
I'm going to walk deeper into the cloud of bees.
Noah Wilson Rich, an entomologist, walks across a small asphalt lot in Boston's South End. 2 parking spaces are filled with a couple dozen bee boxes. Wilson Rich reaches into one and pulls out a single frame of honeycomb.
Right now I'm holding this frame that is being cleaned out by all sorts of bees. Sometimes bees will tumble after they land from a flight and do some somersaults.
This is extraordinary. I mean, there's so many of them.
There are tens of thousands of bees around us right now.
How am I doing?
You're doing great, even as some land on our heads.
We don't have any protective gear on. Wilson Rich is only wearing shorts and a t-shirt with the words "Best Bees" printed across the front. That's the name of the honeybee research company he founded a few years ago. We head inside, and Wilson Rich shows me the company's modest lab space.
So the research is really focused on ways that we can make bees healthier.
You probably know that bees aren't faring so well these days. Some call it colony collapse disorder. Populations are at an all-time low due to disease, pesticides, and habitat loss. Wilson Rich began his work to make bees healthier back in graduate school.
I spent many a sleepless night poking bees with syringes.
How do you do that? You gotta hold the bee down?
Yes, really. One bee at a time. You can anesthetize a bee, put her to sleep, and I would do surgery or implants on bees to test their immune function.
That sounds really laborious.
This is graduate school. Everyone has their experiences like this.
Then Wilson Rich tried a different approach, delivering vaccines and probiotics to bees orally.
We can give the entire hive of tens of thousands of bees a treatment all at once. It's a lot more efficient.
These treatments are still in development, and they require money, which, says Wilson Rich, has become harder and harder to come by in academia.
I was finishing up my PhD, and the economy wasn't looking so good, and my experience with writing grants was not as successful as I had hoped.
And so Wilson Rich developed a new funding model, which is at the core of his business, Best Bees.
We fully manage honeybee hives for residents and businesses throughout eastern Massachusetts. 100% of the profits goes to fund our in-house research, and it's working.
That's why all those honeybee hives are out in the parking lot. It's a staging area before they're delivered to homes, companies, even hotels.
6th floor.
6th floor.
And then to the penthouse.
David Walsh, the facilities manager at Boston's Fairmont Battery Wharf Hotel, escorts a few of us up onto the sunny hotel roof, including Aaliyah Marinone, who's in charge of operations at Best Bees. She puts on her beekeeping suit, makes her way over to the 3 bee boxes, and begins her inspection.
I'm trying to make sure that a queen is laying eggs.
So now, is this part of the service that Best Bees provides?
Yes. All of this is just making sure that your hive is healthy and functioning properly.
Best Bees replaces diseased honeycomb frames. Sometimes they add a new queen to hives without one. And they also harvest the honey, something that Arvi Odens, the executive chef here, is excited about using in the hotel kitchen.
Cheese and honey is fantastic. Also, we have great mixologists downstairs in our bar, and they keep on asking me, Chef, when's the honey ready? Because they really want to start making some drinks.
David Walsh sampled the rooftop honey a few weeks ago and loved it.
That honey had essence of lemon. And talk about fresh, I mean, it was right out of the hives.
And it was at that moment that one of the thousands of bees flying around the rooftop found its way onto the chef's head. Uh-oh, yeah. Chef just got a bee in his hair.
Yeah, and he's allergic, so he's
he's allergic.
He is.
Not to worry, though. Chef Odens headed for the hospital, and despite a bee sting to the temple, he ended up being just fine. I reached him by phone a couple days later.
No swelling at all, just a little bit of a bump, and that's about it.
Odens doesn't mind, and it hasn't changed his view of those rooftop honeybees.
I love bees and honey so much. It's very challenging for me to stay away from them.
Noah Wilson Rich, the founder of Best Bees, feels the same way. He loves bees. And in the interest of full disclosure, I should say that while he and I were standing inside that bee cloud in the parking lot, we both got stung.
So,
I think I just got stung. Ow. Me on my left arm, Wilson Rich on his fingertip.
I can get you some ice if that would
Maybe,
help.
yeah.
Yeah.
But he's used to getting stung. It's kind of an occupational hazard.
I've had hundreds of stings in one day. That's like a tough day at the office.
But for Wilson Rich, a tough day at this office, surrounded by honeybees and all the research underway to make them healthier, beats any alternative. Check out EOL.org for some photos of urban beekeeping and a set of honeybee observer cards. Our series, One Species at a Time, is produced by Atlantic Public Media in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. I'm Ari Daniel.